All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It is Wednesday, and you know what that means? Time to dive deeper into the lost wisdom of the pharaohs, better known as the Corpus Hermeticum, the divine Pymander. Original manuscript, Hermes Trismegistus, 3rd century AD. This is a new edition, 2015, edited by Tarl Warwick, sorry. And last week, we went through the holy sermon of Hermes Trismegistus from the Corpus Hermeticum. Now, I'm not sure if the Holy Sermon came from Hermes, and if Hermes, someone asked, was a deity, then how did he create these physical works? But this is all wonderful and exciting, ladies and gentlemen, because this has been a fascinating journey, and I'm super excited for today's book. I believe this is the 4th book in the Corpus Hermeticum, and it is entitled The Key. And the key, I have no idea where it will go. But with that said, ladies and gentlemen, let's not keep you waiting. Let's just dive right into it and see what we can discover about the lost wisdom of the ages and the knowledge of the things that are. Because if you remember back in the very first book of the Corpus Hermeticum, entitled Hermes Trismegistus, his first book, it began by saying, "O my son, write this first book for both humanity's sake and for piety towards God. For there can be no religion more true or just than to know the things that are." Now, some people might say religions are just cults, and that's fine if that's the way that you want to see things. We're all open to our own perspectives and interpretations, but I would like to say that's why I like this spiritual philosophy, which it seems many others are based off of, or at least they all come to similar understandings with different descriptions and meanings. However, the simple fact that there can be no religion or spiritual pursuit for oneself more true or just than to simply seek to know the things that are, and to acknowledge thanks for all things, and to that which hath made them. Which thing, hopefully, I'll add, we shall not cease continually doing. And so, with that said, we are seeking to discover a greater awareness, a greater understanding of the nature of reality and the world and the realm, if you want to call it that, that we find ourselves in, so that through that increased awareness, we can hopefully increase the quality of our experience. Now, let us begin on book or chapter number 4 of the Corpus Hermeticum. I think they're separate books because they don't really flow together like chapters would. They're kind of their own separate, pieces of literary work. Now, chapter 4, or book number 4, whatever you want. The key, ladies and gentlemen. Number 1, yesterday's speech, O Asclepius, I dedicated to you. This day it is fit to dedicate to Thoth, T-A-T, because it is an epitome of those general speeches which were spoken to him. So it seems Thoth is speaking to Asclepius, or Hermes is speaking to Asclepius. And he says, yesterday's speech I dedicated to you, which makes me wonder what speech that was. Was that one of the previous things we read? It doesn't seem like it told us that he had been talking to Asclepius at any point in the previous 3 books, but maybe that was what the Holy Sermon was. Not sure, and that's why we're here to discover and try to figure this out, because this seems to be important wisdom that has stood the test of time. Now, he says, this day, however, so now it is fit to dedicate these new speeches that he is going to do to Thoth. T-A-T, capital T-A-T, because it is an epitome of those general speeches which were spoken to him. Number 2, God, therefore, and the Father, and the good, O Thoth, have the same nature, or rather also the same act and operation. So he's going to go into describing there some more occult or esoteric workings and understandings of the nature of reality, of creation. That's what a lot of this has been about in these first 3 books, is a description and understanding between Thoth, the Egyptian sage god, or Hermes Trismegistus, and the mind of God, or Atum. And so I asked myself, when glancing at that a little bit last week when we were finishing up our Wednesday video, I wondered to myself, who is this Thoth? T-A-T. So I thought I'd search it up a little bit here, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, you know, we know how we can believe everything on the internet facetiously there, but all I could find was this Tantanin or Tatanin. And this is interesting because it's also Tatinin, Tatjinin, Tathinin, Taninin, Tinin, Tanu, but supposedly was the deity of the primordial mound in ancient Egyptian religion. You might be saying, the primordial mound, what does that mean? His name means risen land or exalted earth. So very special earth, as well as referring to the silt of the Nile. So the most important and fertile. You know, this makes me think of Terra Preta, actually. But that's a different subject. If you've never looked into Terra Preta, check that out. But as a primeval chthonic deity, Tantanin was identified with creation. And so isn't this interesting that Hermes or Thoth is always talking to Atum or the Pomander or Pymander, the mind of God, about this subject of creation and learning how everything works together through the knowledge of creation. The creation of reality, the creation of the gods, the creation of the elements, creation of man, the creation of everything. And this is another subject I thought very interesting in the past that if you haven't thought of, be sure to check this out. Is Amun and Ra the same god? Amun was the god who created the universe, so another creation god. There seems to be a bunch of gods in the Egyptian, I don't really want to call it mythology because that doesn't give it great credence, but however, there seems to be a bunch of Egyptian gods that would be connected to or related to creation. So Amun created the universe. Ra was the god of the sun and light who traveled across the sky every day in a birdie boat. The two gods were combined into one, Amun-Ra, in the time of the New Kingdom between 16th and 11th centuries BCE. But Ra, being the god of the sun, I find interesting because the sun is also responsible for so much of the creation of life that we have here on our world. And so it also mentioned in the Hermetica in the past that each of the planetary gods, including the sun and the moon, are mirrored in the physical realm from their spiritual or divine nature. And so the sun being an aspect of that deity that is a mirror in our physical realm. But I just thought that interesting to point out that a lot of the beginning of this has been all about creation. And when Thoth came up, creation came up. And then also, let's dive into this, and I'll talk a little bit more about creation later and the sounds of Ah and Ra and God Amun, Amen being let it be so, or may it be created. Very interesting correlations between all of that and the sound of creation. However, back to the key in the Corpus Hermeticum. So, number 3, for there is one name or appellation of nature or increase which concerns things changeable, and another about things unchangeable, and about things immovable. That is to say, things divine and mundane. Every one of that which himself will have so to be. You can see that this English translation of this may not be giving the same impression as it may originally have had, but also you can read over these things many times and gain new impressions every time. So, things divine and mundane, every one of that which himself will have so to be. Both divine and mundane are a dual nature, immortal and mortal, spiritual and physical, as we learned in previous books, as well as in the Hermetica. The Hermetica is over here, if you're wondering why I'm glancing or referencing over there, ladies and gentlemen. Now, but action or operation is of another thing, or elsewhere, as we have taught in other things divine and mundane, which must here also be understood. Number 4, for his operation or act is his will and his essence. To will all things to be. I'll read that one again. For his operation or act is his will and his essence to will all things to be. For what is God and the Father and the good, but the being of all things that yet are not, and the existence itself of those things that are? Posed as a question there. This is God. This is the Father. This is the good by which no other thing is present or approaches. That was number 6. Number 7, for the world and the Son, which is also a father by participation. See, there's the Son again, being Ra. And so for the world and the Son also is, which is also a father by participation, is not for all that equally the cause of good and of life to living creatures. And if this be so, he is altogether constrained by the will of the good, without which it is not possible either to be or to be begotten or made. Wow, this is packed in tightly. They put a lot of information, Hermes or whoever, put a lot of information into these sentences. I'm going to try to go through number 7 there again quickly, see if we can glean a deeper meaning for ourselves. Once again, this being very deep esoteric. For the world and the Son, which is also a father by participation, is not for all that equally the cause of good and of life to living creatures. And if this be so, he is altogether constrained by the will of the good, without which it is not possible either to be or to be begotten or made. The only thing that's keeping me from really getting this is whoever the he is. If they're referring to Atum here, the one God, then that could make more sense. You know, I've never actually, I got Atum from the Hermetica, because Hermes references the one God Atum often. And that makes me wonder, ladies and gentlemen, wow, look at this connection to what we were just looking at with Amun and Ra and creation and Thoth. And here we go. Atum, Egyptian god. Atum or Atum Ra. So is it Amun Ra? Atum Ra? God of the sun, supreme god of the Egyptian pantheon, once again responsible for creation of the universe. So Amun apparently is the same character as Atum. Atum, sometimes rendered as Atim or Tim, is the primordial god of Egyptian mythology from whom all else arose. See, that's a little different than correlating it with Amun and calling it the god of sun. Atum, in ancient Egyptian religion, one of the manifestations of the sun and creator god, perhaps originally a local deity of Heliopolis. As you can see, there's many ways that you could take this, ladies and gentlemen. Pre-dynastic solar deity, but see, it always comes back to the sun, creation, and those concepts, whether it be so. Maybe here in the key they are referring to Atum, Amun. Very fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. Now, number 8, verse number 8 from book number 4 of the Corpus Hermeticum. But the Father is the cause of his children, who hath a will both to sow and nourish that which is good by the Son. 9. For good is always active or busy in making, and this cannot be in any other but in him that takes nothing, and yet wills all things to be. For I will not say, O Thoth, making them, for he that makes is defective in much time, and which sometimes he makes not, as also of quantity and quality. For sometimes he makes those things that have quantity and quality, and sometimes the contrary. Number 10, but God is the Father and the good in being all things, for he both will be this and is it, and yet all this for himself in him that can see it. The wording of this is very layered. Like you get multiple meanings from, but God is the Father and the good, so he's the creator, the begetter of all things, but and of himself in being all things, for he will be both this, whatever this is, and is it, whatever it is, and yet all this for himself within him. So all of this for himself, for itself, if that works better for you to describe reality or all of creation, for himself in him that can see it. So he can also see it through everything that can see it. It makes me think of when sometimes people will say, this reality is the purpose of it is for God to experience itself, which is fascinating because we're all trying to discover more of ourselves. And if you're not, then remember the great teaching to seek to know thyself. And that is where true wisdom can be found. However, you can also find some true wisdom in the Corpus Hermeticum, apparently, ladies and gentlemen. If you're getting value, thank you for being here. I love and appreciate each and every one of you so much. Now, number 10, we just did. Number 11, for all things else are for this, It is the property of good to be known. This is the good, O Thoth. So for all things else are for this is the property of good. So everything else for this purpose is the property of good to be known by all of us. This, Hermes says, I believe, is the good, O Thoth. He said, this is number 12, you have filled us, O Father, with a sight both good and fair, and the eye of my mind is almost become more holy by the sight. The sight of this knowledge, this understanding, possibly, I may ask. Number 13, I reply, I wonder not at it, for the sight of good is not like the beam of the sun, which being of a fiery shining brightness makes the eye blind by its excessive light that gazes upon it, rather the contrary, for it enlightens, and so much increases the light of the eye as any man is able to receive the influence of this intelligible clarity. Wow. This is very fascinating, ladies and gentlemen. I was just watching a podcast a couple days ago talking about light being a possible form of divinity, as well as a transmission of information or knowledge or enlightenment, an understanding, a new awareness, and that there is a threefold nature of that. The what do you have? The positive, neutral, negative polarities, or the expansive and contractive principles of the opposites of the elements. And you have the male and the female, and the androgynon, neutral polarity that balances out all of it. This is fascinating. That's popping into my head now here with the wavelengths of the light he was discussing as the red shift. I forget which direction it is, but the red shift being the future and the blue shift being the past, going different directions, the purple being the neutral or the present. Very interesting. Just thinking about this beam of light. He goes, I'm going to read 12 and 13 there again after that ramble. He said, you have filled us, O Father, with a sight both good and fair, and the eye of my mind is almost become more holy by the sight. Now, this sight must have been, he says, I replied, I wonder not at it, for the sight of good is not like the beam of the sun, which being of a fiery shining brightness makes the eye blind by its excessive light that gazes upon it, but rather the contrary, for it enlightens and so much increases the light of the eye, those who have the eyes to see, as any man is able to receive the influence of this intelligible clarity. Profound, powerful. Number 14. For it is more swift and sharp to perceive and innocent or harmless withal, and full of immortality, and they are capable and can draw any store of this spectacle and sight, do many times fall asleep from the body into this most fair and beauteous vision. These things, Celeus and Saturn, our progenitors obtain to. Wow. Then there comes in Saturn, being referred to as a progenitors, or that the progenitors of these cultures of humanity, these, or the deities that are being referenced here. If you're getting this clearer than I am, please share it in the comments section below. That's why we're here, to study together, ladies and gentlemen, so that we can at least come to a greater awareness and understanding, so that we can capture this great wisdom for ourselves in order to increase the quality of our lives. Because remember, so interesting. Well, I wonder what Celius is. We can look that up here in just a second. And Saturn, our progenitors obtained to. Saturn's been referenced, what was it, as Shamash, or I forget. It's not my biggest area of study. However, I listen to a lot of stuff about, and apparently it may have been our previous sun, in that it was our original star, and before the Earth had seasons and whatever, and then we were captured by this solar system, and then the destruction of Tiamat happened and causes the asteroid belt, and the reshifting of the planetary alignments, and a lot of catastrophes and cataclysms in historical accounts and things like that. But that is a different subject. But the purpose of all of this is because it's all connected, ladies and gentlemen. And so we're going to keep studying forever. But remember, we go like we do all the time whenever we're talking about Hermetics, is we go to the Hermetics, the Hermetica, and the lost wisdom of the pharaohs. In memory of Giordano Bruno, 1548 to 1600. The world is a beautiful, did you say thing or nothing? The world is a beautiful nothing. Hilarious. Now, then the very first words in the Hermetica from Hermes himself, in the prophecies of Hermes, where Hermes describes the nature of pure philosophy, but laments that in future generations it will become all but lost, this pure philosophy. And so the philosophy that Hermes teaches is not just a clever intellectual exercise, ladies and gentlemen. This is coming to us from the Hermetica. It is about focusing the mind in deep meditation on Atum, an ancient Egyptian name for God, the one God, the God responsible for the creation of everything, and that is actually everything, contains everything within itself. This is, the Tao, God, grand organized design, great spirit, whatever you want to call it. And such pure philosophy is about rising above mere opinions to experience directly the mind of the universe, or a Pymander, the mind of God, or a connection to this energy force that is responsible for everything. I like the way the Tao puts it. The Tao Te Ching from Lao Tzu, 2,500 years ago, says to us that the Tao does nothing, but leaves nothing undone. So in other words, when you observe nature, it would take a very long time to notice the plants, actually growing. You would need a time-lapse video like we have nowadays to see the functioning of nature and see that nature is actually doing something. But when you just glance at it, it is seemingly doing nothing at all. It's just standing there. But at the same time, it is leaving nothing undone, to where nature itself is taking care of everything while seemingly just sitting there being. And this is a powerful philosophy for one's own self in our lives, about not struggling and striving and pushing so much, but rather being and allowing and aligning and attuning ourselves, attuning ourselves. I made that up. That's cool, though. We need to tune ourselves with attum now. But so the point of what I was saying here is that The most important thing that we can remember when it comes to studying this kind of esoteric, occult, spiritual philosophy, I just like to call it spiritual philosophy, is what Hermes tells us here in the first lines of the prophecies of Hermes, is that pure philosophy is spiritual striving through constant contemplation to attain true knowledge of Atum, the one God, the universe, the reality where we find ourselves. So, pure philosophy, this pure philosophy that he was afraid would be lost in future generations, I think we are rebuilding it and bringing it back today with the ability that we have now to discuss and compare side by side. We can continue this constant contemplation, or as it was described, a continued meditation, a continued thinking about it. And it is through that process that you really come to true attainment of knowledge, is how Hermes or Thoth put it. Now, let's go back to the key, the fourth book in the Corpus Hermeticum. We are on verse number 16. Now, let's go back and do 14 and 15 again, just to remind ourselves why we were rambling there. And if you're getting value, thank you for being here once again. This is for the few, I'm sure. Can't imagine a million people are sticking around for the wisdom of this, but one day, if we can get there, maybe not me, but we can get some really popular presenter to get this to the masses. But there would have to be a reason to do so, because most people would be like, what does this have anything to do with my daily life? Well, depends what you're interested in. If you're seeking to discover the wisdom of the ages and seeking to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment and a greater awareness of the nature of reality and an understanding of this thing that everybody seems to refer to as God or different names, that is throughout all cultures. Anyways, I'm rambling again. Number 14. For it is more swift and sharp to pierce, and innocent or harmless withal, and full of immortality, and they are capable, and can draw any store of this spectacle and sight, do many times fall asleep from the body. This makes me think you like astral project, or you have an out-of-body spiritual experience, or you even maybe pass out totally from, being overwhelmed sensually. Do many times of this spectacle and sight fall asleep from the body into this most fair and beautiful vision. These things, Celeus and Saturn, our progenitors obtained to. 15. He said, I would we also, O Father, could do so. Number 16, I replied, I wish we could, O Son, but for the present, we are less intent to the vision and cannot yet open the eyes of our mind to behold the incorruptible and incomprehensible beauty of that good. But then we shall see it when we have nothing at all to say of it. Wow. That makes me think of the Tao as well. Ever desiring, one sees only the mystery. Ever desireless, one can see the truth. Let's reference that there. This is important. This is the way my mind works. We just kind of bring it together here, and I'm hoping I can find, is that the first verse of the Tao Te Ching? Yes, here we go. The Tao that can be told. So think of this as Atum, or God, or Tat, apparently. The Tao that can be told, the God that can be described, is not the eternal God. It's not Atum. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The Tao, God, Atum, Tat, Ra, whatever you want to call it, universe, The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The Tao is both named and nameless. As nameless, it is the origin of all things. As named, so when you put a title on it or try to shove it into a category, it becomes the mother of 10,000 things. I think what Lao Tzu means by the 10,000 things there is all of the things that are separate that we see in reality. Like, I am me, and this is a table, and these are chairs, and that's a plant, and you are you, and none of us are connected because the ego has got us convinced that we're all separate characters fighting for survival, and we're not this oneness and this connected universal harmony of creation. I have no idea what I'm going to title this video. Maybe I'll just call it The Key. But here is where the greatest line, I think, from the first verse of the Tao Te Ching is, ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one sees only the manifestations. And the mystery itself is the doorway to all understanding. So if we remain desireless, meaning that we're not like, I don't know, this is contrary, because many times Hermes is desiring to know the knowledge of the things that are. But maybe when you're too connected to your intellectual pursuit, you can't actually obtain the essence of that which you already are. And so let me read that line again, because he goes, we cannot yet see this vision. Even the gods, I guess. I reply, I wish we could, O son, but for the present we are less intent to the vision and cannot yet open the eyes of our mind to behold the incorruptible and incomprehensible beauty of that good. But then we shall see it, when we have nothing at all to say of it. So remember, the Tao that is named is not the eternal Tao. When you have something to say of it, it is not it, and you cannot comprehend or conceive of this incorruptible and incomprehensible beauty. But when we have nothing to say of it at all, and we just allow, I guess, and let go. It's funny how this has taken me back to the Tao Te Ching so much. In the philosophy of like releasing your connection to want to, you know, really have a firm, this is like trying to, I think it was Alan Watts who described, I don't know if it was him trying to describe God or what, but he described swimming. And it's like, you don't connect with God by trying to get a firm grasp and hold on it, much like when you're in water. You don't float and swim in the water by trying to stand on top of it and get a firm, you know, foundation below yourself. That will cause you to sink. You'll just be, you know, it won't work. And so instead, you have to allow, you have to relax, you have to embrace and feel the motions of the water, and you have to go with it in order to be in harmony or be able to work with it, in order for it to give you the ability that you need to be able to swim, metaphorically. Hopefully that was a good metaphor for somebody who needed it. I often wonder sometimes if any of this is making sense, but I'm getting value anyways, because I know the next time I comprehend a lot of this, I will be thinking back to these correlations. So let us continue into the key in the Corpus Hermeticum. I'm not sure if it's been an hour yet, probably about 40 minutes. Let's see, we are on number 17. So, but then we shall see it. This was the finish of 16 there. When we have nothing to say of it. Number 17, for the knowledge of it is a divine silence. Yes. See, that makes me think of another spiritual teaching that comes from, I forget, but that silence is the one and only true sound of God. So if you want to hear what God has to say, find profound divinity in the silence. Anyways, number 17. For the knowledge of it is a divine silence, and the rest of all the senses. Like a rest, like a sleeping, or a diminishing of all of our bodily senses. For neither can he that understands that understand anything else, nor he that sees that see anything else, nor hear any other thing, nor even move the body. This is, oh, I hope you're getting some. This is so wonderful. This is taking my mind in a million directions. Number 18, for shining steadfastly upon and round the whole mind, it enlightens all the soul. And loosing it from the bodily senses and motions, it draws it from the body and changes it wholly into the essence of God. 19, for it is possible for the soul, O son, to be defied. It is possible for the soul, O son, to be defied, while yet it lodges in the body of man, if it contemplates the beauty of the good. He asked, how do you mean defying, Father? 21, I replied, there are differences, O son, of every soul. He said, but how do you again divide the changes? I replied, have you not heard in the general speeches that from one soul of the universe are all the souls which in the world are tossed up and down, as it were, and severally divided? Question. He's like, have you not already learned this? Of these souls, there are many changes, some into more fortunate estate, and some quite the contrary, a less fortunate estate. And this was described in the previous speeches in Pymander, and how we each are created up with different characteristics of the gods and given their traits and different powers. And then according to our karmic destiny or something like that, I forget the terms it used, but our destiny is a good way to put it. And we end up with different fates based on these different traits and characteristics. And probably, like, if you look at astrology, when you're born at a specific time in the celestial calendar or the zodiac, that you receive not only your life path roughly, I mean, you can choose different paths, but you receive that, your destiny, your fate, your characteristics, your traits, all of this kind of stuff, whether you're going to be an artist or you're going to be a warrior, or you know what I mean. And so fascinating. This the key, the fourth book of the Corpus Hermeticum for me so far, just in the first 16 to 20 verses, have been profound and mind-blowing. But it comes off of the base and the foundation of the Hermetica in its entirety, and the first three books of the Corpus Hermeticum so far. So it looks like this is going to be a good long one, ladies and gentlemen, all the way to 94 verses. And then the next book after that is that God is not manifest and yet is most manifest. This may describe that nature, that dual nature of spiritual and material, and how it is everything, but it is not any one thing at the same time. much like was described in the first verse of the Tao Te Ching that we said a minute ago. Let us go through a few more verses here, and then we'll leave it there for now. It looks like we're going to have a few weeks of this fourth book, The Key, in the Corpus Hermeticum. It should be a fun one, ladies and gentlemen. I've been loving it so far. Hopefully you have too, and I'm sure that you are, because this is powerful. This is profound. This is life-changing. So I'm going to go through 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23 relatively quickly without trying to cut in there. 19. For it is possible for the soul, O son, to be defied, while yet it lodges in the body of man, if it contemplates the beauty of the good. 20. He asked, how do you mean defying, father? 21. I replied, there are differences, O son, of every soul. He said, but how do you again divide the changes? 23. I replied, have you not heard the general speeches? That from one soul of the universe are all those souls which in the world are tossed up and down, as it were, and severally divided. Of these souls there are many changes, some into more fortunate estate, and some quite the contrary. For they which are of creeping things are changed into those of watery things, and those of things living into and those of things living in the water to those of things living upon the land. And airy ones are changed into men, and human souls that lay a hold of immortality are changed into daemons. Now, Daemons. Demons and daemons, very different things, ladies and gentlemen. Be sure not to make that mistake. Now, 24. And so they go into the sphere or region of the fixed gods. For there are two choirs or companies of gods, one of them that wander, and another of them that are fixed. And so this is the perfect glory of the soul. Is this talking about becoming a star and a deity, as the stars are referenced in this incredible, esoteric, mystical, spiritual philosophy? Ladies and gentlemen, that was an amazing last bit there. I think describing the progression of the cycles of the soul going through the different stages of evolution, all the way up to experiencing humanity, and then experiencing divinity and becoming a god. I've never heard it put like that, but he goes, for they which are of creeping things, being the lowest. So insects, I guess. So maybe you start your soul journey as a mineral. You're like a rock, and your consciousness is just that of a rock. And rocks do have consciousness. We got to give mineral kingdom some credit, ladies and gentlemen, because it's getting stepped on all the time. Pun intended. Now, and then which are from the creeping things that are changed into those of watery things. So you become a fish, maybe later, or a whale, or, I think dolphins would be a very high level of fish existence, so to speak. However, and then of those things living in the water to those things living upon the land. So then you become, a horse or a bear or a jaguar, whatever it is. This is maybe how people have an affinity to certain animals or traits and characteristics of animals. And then finally, which had the most respect, I believe, in the Egyptian culture, and the airy ones. In other words, the birds. So you become things living upon the land after, so it goes from insects to fish. Supposedly, this is just me kind of extrapolating here. So if you get something different from this, that's totally fine. We're just here to try to extrapolate and see what we can discover. But apparently you go from insects to fish to beasts upon the land, and then to birds, and then into men or humanity, men and women. And human souls that lay hold of immortality are changed into quote unquote daemons or great spirits, deities, and so they go on into the sphere or region of the fixed gods. To me, that's talking about the heavens, the constellations, the zodiac. For there are two choirs or companies of these gods, one of them that wander, so the wandering stars, or maybe even comets, maybe even rogue star, these wandering planetary things, or I guess celestial bodies or beings, and then those of them that are fixed. And so this is the perfect glory of the soul. But the soul entering into the body of a man, if it continues to do evil, shall neither taste of immortality nor is partaker of the good. And so that's where it will go into the warning of us to be careful and to be seekers of the good and be a part of those human souls that lay hold of the wisdom of the pharaohs. One sec, ladies and gentlemen. That's funny. I was just watching Rex do a little video about this earlier. The national alert, apparently the entire United States as well as Russia is simultaneously doing a test of the national wireless emergency alert system to improve the previous emergency alert system that everybody would hear on the radio. But how many people listen to radio nowadays? I do. How many people listen to radio every day nowadays? I do, but I'm probably one of the few. So anyways, ladies and gentlemen, you could have turned your phone off before that test and would have not have received the message if you kept your phone off for 30 minutes. I thought it was going to be at 2 p.m., but apparently it was just now at 12:18 p.m. Mountain Time. It's a very random time. But anyways, sorry for that little distraction. But this was powerful, ladies and gentlemen. And we want to be one of those human souls that lays hold of immortality and the knowledge of the one God, Atum. But remember, pure philosophy is spiritual striving through constant contemplation, a constant meditation to attain that true knowledge. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we will leave it right there. You can expand the description to get this book for yourself, to put it on your shelf, so you can follow along in this series of the Corpus Hermeticum and learning and diving deeper into an understanding of Hermetics, the ultimate, I would say, but I've yet to look into many others, but the ultimate esoteric, occult, mystical, spiritual philosophy. And so with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I love and appreciate each and every one of you that spend time here with me and Hermes Trismegistus, Atum, Thoth, the Egyptian sage god, and many more. And be sure, ladies and gentlemen, to continue to seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through an increased awareness and understanding of the nature of our reality, so that through that awareness, you can increase the quality of your experience and hopefully increase the lives of not only ourselves, but the lives of those around us. And remember that there is no way to happiness, because happiness is the way. And when we can bring it to life, rather than seeking to get it from somewhere else, but we can bring it from within ourselves to life, then all the things we've been telling ourselves, oh, I'll be happy when I'm this kind of person, or when I get that much money, or have all of that becomes irrelevant, because then we are there. And then the journey, hopefully, is wonderful. Thank you so much once again. I love and appreciate each and every one of you that spends time here with me in these premieres. If you got value, consider subscribing, share this with somebody who is like-minded, and support the work that we do here as well. I have my Etsy shop linked below. Maybe I'll show you a landscape painting randomly, ladies and gentlemen, just to give you a taste of nature there. A taste of the creation of Atum. I really love these red bushes down here, and the little water lines down there. That's always fun to check some of that out. Beautiful work. Anyways, expand the description below to check out my Etsy shop if you want to check out more of my paintings and get one for yourself to put on your wall, as well as a link to the book to get it for yourself to put it on your shelf, and as well a link to C60 Purple Power, the most powerful antioxidant known to man. Give yourself the gift of health. And until next week on Tuesday, or next week on Wednesday, depending which days you join us for. Different topics each day, but that's fine. Be the change that you want to see. Be the example that you want to set. Shout out to Rex for that. Be the change, ladies and gentlemen.